This is Spice FM on 94.4 in Nairobi, www.spicefm.co.ke. Across the globe, you can watch us there. Welcome to the Situation Room. My name is Latiff. I'll be joined by Okoh, Muga, and Njeri Thorne. It's top of the hour.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
Here to do your mornings right. Good morning and how are you doing? Welcome to the Situation Room right here on Spice FM, the one and only talk show in Nairobi that, well, across the country actually, that takes a look at all issues that matter for you and to you. My name is Latiff. I'm joined in the studio by Muga, educationist, social scientist. He's a biomedical researcher. He's also a political strategist, and he doesn't hold back on anything that he'd like to say. I'm also joined by Njeri Thorne, a legal mind, political mind, controversial mind, everything mind. She's got a lot of things.
And a lovely person, thank you.
And as she says, a lovely person.
Yes.
Okoh is here, is a resident expatriate. Born in Nigeria, lived in many parts of the world, brings all that into the country, finds a home in Kenya, and starts a family here. Besides that, Okoh is a communications specialist, and she also has a lot to say.
Good morning.
Even when she doesn't say it. Good morning to all of you. My name is Latiff, and I'm just the guy who sits here, who's been here for many years doing the same exact thing that I'm doing. But I love conversations, and I love stoking intelligent conversations. Let's take a look at what's been covered in the dailies and on TV and everywhere. Everything that's happening around the world.
News in the papers.
Who takes it first? Muga.
Two of our dailies seem to be in agreement. The discussion is the same. The issue about dynasties and the relationship of dynasties to the proverbial handshake. You see, this is, the word I think that comes to mind is conundrum. On the one hand, we don't want to talk politics, but if the president of the nation brings up that particular topic, what you're doing is encouraging the same topic that we are not supposed to. Well, we're supposed to tone down on. You cannot discuss politics in this country and not discuss dynasties. It is not possible.
Who started the dynasty story anyway?
The dynasty story has always been in the minds of people, but the person who's brought it to light and has spoken about it continuously is the deputy president.
Good morning. The two papers basically are rebuttal to what I would deem as the deputy president's narrative for 2022. He's touching on the dynasty aspect and trying to get people away from that. He's pushed that he's a hustler, so you also have that rebuttal coming from dynasty hustler talk won't get you to power. So the two narratives I see for 2022 by the DP are either
dynasty versus we the people.
Yes, and he's really sold himself as a hustler. But competing with that narrative is a very strong one in that we can't have, Kikuyu Kalenjin. So that would be the other side. That on the flip side of the coin, that's another narrative. So it's, whichever packages itself best for public consumption in terms of campaigns and so on.
Now that we are 44, so this is where it's also bringing back the 42 versus 2.
We're 44 now, are we?
Yep.
Okay.
Now we are 44 versus 2. So let me put the context here. The context is the president was speaking yesterday. Remember, yesterday was the commemoration of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta's death. Mm-hmm. And they were there at the mausoleum, and of course the president was there, the deputy president was there, the first lady was there, the Kenyatta family was there, other political leaders were there, including the Speaker of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka, and others. And that's when the president spoke about this. And it appeared like he was actually directly responding to his deputy, William Ruto, and that's what has also
of course,
been covered. The deputy president started, in fact, one of the areas where the deputy president spoke directly about this was the national prayer breakfast at Safari Park earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And he said, some of us have more reasons to thank God for than some of you. We have worked hard to get where we are. Mm-hmm. It's like you were saying, some of you were born with
silver spoon in your mouth.
Silver spoons in their mouths. Mm-hmm. Well, others, we had no spoon at all. we had to go and look for a spoon. We did not have the word spoon.
And of course that appeals to the hearts and minds of the masses, no doubt.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And the president now says, no. Actually, the thing of dynasty, no, it's about an individual. An individual puts themselves out and seeks to serve the people of this republic, and the people of the republic agree that that this person is suitable for the position. CT, you just quiet. You just it's like you're processing
I'm trying to
something.
determine. You see, there are things that you hear from politicians, and in and of itself, the statement is true because that's what politicians are supposed to do. But when you look at the sum total of the activities that politicians engage in, that just becomes talk. It's just talk. It has nothing to do with the mandate that they sought to achieve or to attain for these so-called people. The people are always at the heart of every discussion a politician has. Even this discussion we're having, it's about the people. The DP wants to appeal to the people. There's a rebuttal to the people.
Yeah.
Yes. And the understanding is that everything they're saying is for the benefit of the people.
It's for the
but,
people.
But the reality often is the contrary.
Ndu,
Yes.
what else is in the headlines? You got
Well, it seems that the DPP made good on his promise and involved the assistants, I would say, of the DCI, and went ahead and dramatically arrested Kerocha owners, Tabitha,
and her husband,
Mr. Karanja. And apparently there's sufficient evidence from KRA showing that they've not paid back taxes of 14 billion shillings. And they've been told that they will appear in court to face these charges. And actually it's been racked up 10 counts of fraud and that they both have to answer for. Now, Mr. Karanja, as Tabitha calls him quite often, is saying that this has nothing to do with back taxes owed. What it has to do with is the launch of some new products, and they are being humiliated, targeted, and intimidated by the officers of the KRA as well as that of the DCI and the DPP. And yes, so they were arrested yesterday after spending 24 hours in their office trying to figure out really what was going on.
It was quite dramatic, wasn't it?
Quite dramatic.
Must it be this dramatic, really?
It doesn't have to be. You know, but, well, there was drama. So let me just give you the context. The drama was Tabitha and the husband went, while they are in their office at the brewery, and they did not leave the premise. It took the DCI officers a couple of hours to come in and speak to them, and they got them out of the office and put them in cars and drove them all the way to Mazingira House in Nairobi for questioning. Also arrested, rather more dramatically than the first two, were their bodyguards. Did you see that? And I always have a problem with this. Bodyguards were arrested, they were bundled into the boots of the Subaru cars and driven all the way to Nairobi. Now, why would police be breaking the law that they're supposed to
Uphold.
Why would you put somebody, a human being, in the boot of a car?
Yeah, because then we now start to get into all kinds of human rights violations
Safety
while
as
trying
well.
to... Yes, and safety. We
Is that part of their training, really?
You know, I wonder.
safety training.
No. Bundling people into the boots of cars.
I wonder what Michuki would say about this.
It seems that they do it quite well.
Seat belts. So we pushed so hard to have seat belts, even in public vehicles, and then the police actually put you somewhere where there's no seat belt in the boot. And they drive you all the way to Nairobi. Must you do this? Was it a shortage of cars?
No.
It actually looked like the police were actually they felt very passionate about this case. They too felt that the country has lost a great deal by these alleged back taxes. So they needed to show that they were doing everything in their power
No.
to make sure that they
That
pushed their particular agenda.
No, my dear.
This is laced with sarcasm if you haven't picked it up by now. Really.
that level of enthusiasm speaks more of where the orders came from.
There's power behind it.
Yes.
No, whenever police are arresting people, actually, they always have this tendency. And in fact, somebody has been driven from Mombasa to Nairobi in the boot of a car. Somebody has been driven from Eldoret to Nairobi in the boot. Just because I am not a mheshimiwa or because I am not a billionaire owner of a business doesn't mean that I don't have as much rights as the other two. So you arrest a mheshimiwa and then this bodyguard.
But remember, there are many other people who've been arrested, and all that they have done is put them in some vehicle and driven them. We saw the governor of Kiambu being arrested not too long ago.
Yep.
He wasn't bundled into any
He
boot.
wasn't bundling.
Precisely. So the question you ask is, why do other people get preferential
Double
treatment?
standards. And why must police break the law? Because the police have broken the law. I think the DPP should actually order the DCI to investigate the DCI officers.
You know,
Jerry was in the headlines.
I mean, the two headlines are for the Nation and the Standard, sort of in agreement, as CT pointed out. The Star is talking about the story you're talking about with the arrests. I've got the Nairobian, scandalous one, in front of me.
And we said it would come out today, and now that they had been scooped on the story of...
Sabina loved Matthew until she met Nganga. Now, this is what I was talking about yesterday. I mean, Benga Star met beautiful woman rep when she was in campus, and they fell in love and fell out, and apparently just before he died, they had rekindled their love. That's the story there. And I mentioned this yesterday. What's the purpose of this? So what? How does that change the price of rice in China or Kenya?
For this particular publication, it's perfect. This is what they do.
It is scandal, yes.
Yes, this is what they specialize in.
Okay, so I won't give it any more airtime considering what I think of it, but that's what we have in the Nairobian. Back to the Star, we've got a few clips at the top there.
I must put it out here that, Sabina is a personal friend, and I've known her for very many years. And
so can you...
this is a frivolous story.
Are you denying or accepting?
A frivolous story, to say that it's
no, Eric is defending his friend.
Right.
Yeah, it's his friend. He gave the statement credence by the time
it's
when
not a
he
matter
said.
of defense. It's a matter of.
But there's nothing wrong with defending your friend.
She's your friend.
She's your friend.
Where
Defend
the
her.
truth lies.
Yes, it lies with your friend, of course.
So back to the front page of the Star. There's a very interesting clip that leads you to page 5, but it is on the front page where pregnant schoolgirls must give their boyfriends names. It's an interesting one. Now, we were talking about rights and breach of rights and so on.
Yeah.
That is definitely infringement of one right or another. I know definitely, right to privacy is an infringement. But to what end? I think this is a directive by, if we can just open up page 4 and 5 of
where the story is hidden.
It's from the CS. Magoha, pregnant schoolgirls must give names of their boyfriends. Okay, rapists. There's a comma between. It says boyfriends, I guess,
Rapists.
stroke or rapists.
Okay.
And this is in a bid to a pregnant schoolgirl will no longer be expelled as an example of sinful behavior. Okay, already that was quite archaic and not the way forward. Mm-hmm. However, she will be compelled to reveal the identity of the boy or man who made her pregnant, either with her consent or through rape. Okay, so the two are kind of being held quite closely together in conversation, boyfriend and rapist. But she has to give the name. Is this right? And would this act as a deterrent from the guys? Are they going to be more responsible? Of course, for a rapist, I don't know if it would act as a deterrent, but for somebody who it's consensual sex, would it act as a deterrent? What is the purpose? What is the desired objective here?
Judges are meeting in Mombasa, and remember we said yesterday that in fact one of the things that the CJ told them to do is immerse yourselves into the conversations in the country. And one of the conversations that was actually started by a judge is around the age of consent. Now, we are talking about students. Mm-hmm. They are underage. They are below the age of consent. So
they're still human. Human rights, things like right to privacy and so on, it applies across the board.
It's true.
It doesn't matter.
What we are saying here is the fact that first part of the statement, boyfriend through via consent. There is no consent.
Right. Okay. So it's still a crime. I guess you'd be compelled or subpoenaed to give information. It's the equivalent of that. Mm-hmm.
Somebody has actually defiled the child.
What if he's the same age or younger?
Whatever the case.
Of course, that debate is still ongoing.
Yes.
Interesting one. Okay.
What is of interest, though, and this isn't actually in the it isn't smack in the headlines, but the issue of why men lock out wives in list of beneficiaries. Maybe this is something we ought to look at in greater detail. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the Nation, this is something that they've actually come up with. And what the conclusion, the brief summary that they have arrived at is that men tend to list mothers and children, and that women rarely list their parents as beneficiaries.
all their husbands. Do they?
With men, I can see the angle there. If your wife is the beneficiary, she can set all manner of situations up where you mysteriously disappear, or I'm thinking, say this is for insurance, or she can have you killed.
Those are first world problems, Njeri.
No. This is exactly what beneficiaries of what, an estate or
Yes. But, Eric, it isn't so.
The reason that Njeri is advancing that because of a woman could take advantage.
No, you're most likely, the person who is most likely to murder you is your spouse. Did you know that?
True.
Statistics have shown.
Yes.
So in keeping with that, you can see why a man would be hesitant to register his wife as a beneficiary of any of his assets or insurance, because, anything goes wrong, she could, a little argument here, she could kill him, or she could plan to kill him. Whereas it's highly unlikely your kids would do so, and definitely more unlikely that your parents would do so. So I think that's the angle. Do you agree, CT? Do?
Well, I don't know if I don't know if now when the beneficiaries are being listed, a man would actually think, let me not list my wife because she would probably kill me, so that then she would now benefit from all that I own, or all that is lined up for inheritance. I don't know if that's specifically what they're thinking in this case. It might come out in the later.
What do you think they're thinking? Because they're not listing their spouses or as next of kin or beneficiaries. What do you think? Why is that?
Maybe it would be asking then, who are they listing?
Their parents and their children.
Yeah, those are people that they are directly related to.
Right.
Trust.
And you trust. You're not related to your wife.
So.
No, you're not.
You're not.
No, you're not.
Legally,
You're
you
not.
are.
No. You're related to your parents.
So it's
Well,
blood.
you
related
talk
to your
about
children.
biologically.
So
Legally, you're related
So the
to your
people
wife.
that you share blood with are the
Blood
people that
is
you
thicker
entrust
than water.
most with your
Earthly
with
goods.
your assets, with the earthly goods.
Or
So-
that you want to leave to enjoy your.
yeah, because you don't know her
Sweat.
from Adam, literally.
You know the reality of
Hold on.
of many unions. Let me talk about this country that we live in. Marriages tend to be adversarial. The love and comfort and the cozy associations related with marriage are usually a concept that we leave for the movies. The
It's
reality,
romanticized.
yes. The reality of most marriages, as I said, they're adversarial. So, and because in many marriages, the person who has the means of looking after the family, many, not all, tend to be men, they will probably hold sway. Now, this article doesn't speak very loudly of what women who perhaps are head of households, or women who are even in a marriage situation, who earn more than the husbands and so have more assets, what they do.
What they list.
Those details are not there, but it does bring up a topic that is worthy of further discussion.
Oh, yes.
I
An
don't think I
investigation.
agree with you that marriage is adversarial and we romanticize them. I think there's happy marriages. There's people who are happy. You're not either married or happy. You can be happily married.
Did anyone hear me say that all marriages in Kenya are adversarial?
Yeah, you were. That's the impression I got. You said
No, I said
marriages-
many.
Many.
I said many.
This is a Situation Room right here on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi and www.spicefm.co.ke globally. We've also got frequencies 96.0 in Nakuru and others across the country. My name is Eric Latiff, Ndu Okoh, Njeri Thorne, and CT Muga in the studio. We're taking a look at what's been covered in the news.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Social story.
CT has actually kicked off on the social angle of things, of what's been covered. And yes, indeed, that needs to be delved into deeper in terms of why do people list who they list. I've got a story here from Kakamega. Police in Quisero are holding a Form 1 student accused of procuring an abortion and burying the fetus in a banana plantation.
Good Lord, sounds
She's
quite
19.
gory.
The 19-year-old girl was arrested on Wednesday at her grandfather's home in Emulepa village. Police are saying they received a tip-off from the members of the public. The Nyumba Kumi leadership actually said, wait, a girl was pregnant here. We saw that she was pregnant, and now we are seeing that she doesn't have a baby. So the girl was arrested while sleeping in her father's house. They went and exhumed and found the remains in a shallow grave. Big issue here. Abortion, teenage pregnancy, underage. No, she's actually 19.
Yes, but the net result of all these activities is that she's been arrested.
Yes.
Is there any mention of any psychosocial support? Is there any mention of any medical support? Is there any mention of any kind of support that is given to such a person? Because by the time this person procures an abortion, it means they do not see a way forward with the child being alive and them looking after the child. This is someone who actually needs help.
Yes.
Totally. I mean, those are mitigating circumstances that she could argue in court. But if we look at the legality behind it, of course, abortion is illegal in Kenya based on the provisions in our constitution. I think it states that life begins at conception. And you can see where the church comes into sort of meddling with the affairs of the state, because nobody knows when life really begins. But you can see that's an injection from the clergy. So it's illegal.
There was injection from the clergy, and then there was injection from the others. And that's why the clergy was on the 20% that voted no, that campaigned for no. Because there's the clause that goes after that says that you can actually procure an abortion if
a doctor deems it necessary, i.e. your life is in danger, or to save the life of the mother. Yes. Now it's quite a contentious point, because a doctor, to have access to a doctor, you need money in Kenya. And what tends to happen is this law then only applies to the less fortunate. So you'll find middle class or upper middle class, upper class, they can procure abortions. So the illegality of an abortion starts to apply only to sort of people less fortunate or in the lower demographic economically. So that's quite unfortunate, and it leads to a lot of quack abortions, which is even more dangerous, leads to a lot of deaths. So there is a problem there. But what's interesting is if they say that the pregnancy was visible, so they could see, you start to wonder how many weeks gone that was, because even in countries where abortion is legal, there is a limitation in that, by about 24 weeks, and it's reduced gradually. It's been coming down to 20 weeks, and the sort of rationale behind it is if a child can survive outside the womb of the mother, they should, that is a life, that is considered a life, and so any tampering or termination of that would then be considered murder. So that's interesting to look at. How far gone was she? If you're now to use Western standards of, if it's not just the abortion, the illegality of the abortion that should be charged with, you can be charged with murder for terminating a pregnancy that is past what would be deemed to be a child that would have survived outside on their own. Those are the legal issues surrounding that.
Social stories across the country. Any other that you've seen? I've got another one here. Police in Malava sub-county, also all happening in Western, are holding a 35-year-old man who allegedly sodomized a boy aged 14 in a village. The locals said the boy had run away from home and was in the company of the suspect, who allegedly promised to provide accommodation for him.
Well, I don't know if this is a social story or just a national story, but Maraga faces protest over graft. The judges are meeting in Mombasa, and the Chief Justice woke up to placard-waving crowds outside their hotel room, within the compound of the hotel that the judges are staying in, and they are saying this. They say that some judges are in complicity on corruption responsible for drug menace at the coast. And Maraga agreed with them. Maraga said, I not deny that some judicial officers could be protecting drug barons, but I cannot do anything because there is no evidence implicating them.
Munataka nifanye nini?
Well, I've always upheld that the judiciary is the bottleneck in the fight against graft. So it's in keeping with my school of thought.
And do have strong opinions on that, but well.
Well, maybe I can. My strong opinions come later, but I think Matiang'i is now getting a bit irritated with all the talk concerning the census, and he now says politicians derailing the census will be dealt with. Tutakushughulikia.
We're profiling you.
Yes.
And very soon.
We know what you're doing, and he says that the state, interestingly enough, was monitoring unnamed leaders who have been convening meetings to plan how people would be counted as they desire. There's been a lot of talk socially the last couple of days in terms of where will we go, how will we be counted, who will come to our homes, if I'm not at home, how will I be? And some politicians have been rallying people up, apparently,
Yeah.
to go vote in particular pockets, because we know why they
In
they
Kiambu,
would-
it's gone actually as far as the CEC for Information and Youth, ICT and Youth, Karongo Thango, has actually issued a statement saying, Kuja nyumbani uhesabiwe.
We are aware of the meetings you had last night, and at appropriate time, we shall ensure you meet with the law. This is what Matiang'i has said. And he's answering these particular politicians who've gone ahead and done this. Interestingly, in the same story, we know that 18.5 billion shillings will be used to carry out this census over the next 1 or so weeks. According to CS Yatani, the 1.5 billion used in census covers the entire exercise, including pre-census activities, between 2016 and 2020. So the exercise began quite a while ago. It even goes further to push CT's argument that if we started spending this money 3 years ago, why is it that we could not do more advocacy and educative initiatives?
We were procuring
concerning-
gadgets.
We did so much already.
Yeah.
We could have done and pushed
A
the,
lot
social
more.
the social and educational angle even more. Publicity, they spent 500 million shillings, and yet many
on
of
what?
us on publicity, 500 million shillings.
Which publicity?
This is the thing.
So there's
500 million shillings
500
was
million
spent,
shillings
but
in
we
the
didn't
last
really
week.
know. I think in the last week is when this 500 million shillings was spent for publicity, so that you will know exactly what will happen in the course of the census.
And in the Nairobian again, sorry, I've got it in front of me.
Yes.
But this is it's for a good cause. I think it's an interesting one, and it's a conversation that is emerging in Kenya. It's Babu, we know the former student leader says bangi should be legalized, bangi being marijuana, weed, legalized, and admits puffing weed 2 months ago. I don't know if that last bit is necessary, and I don't think it was just 2 months ago. I think it's a regular occurrence, but that's neither here nor there. But the idea or the conversation about legalizing marijuana, we've had some sort of resistance coming very strongly from the CS you were just talking about. But of course, it's got its benefits, and those are the things we should be talking about when we're talking about legalizing weed. But also, it's interesting because it's much safer than alcohol. Yet alcohol is not illegal. It kills cancer cells. Sorry, I take it you're against marijuana.
The biomedical research
No, I'm not. No, I'm
comes
not.
in.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Tell us.
I'm simply saying that that debate has never been concluded.
It's never been had.
No, it's been had. It's been had.
Where, in Kenya?
Research has also been done.
With regards to alcohol.
Alcohol and cannabis sativa, and which one affects the brain more, and the damage that it does. The conclusive research on, put this way, the debate is still ongoing, but both are extremely harmful. Consumed over long periods of time, consumed in a manner that is not purpose for medication, they are both harmful, and they do the same thing. They kill brain cells. They both do. You see, the medicinal use of any drug has never been questioned per se. Even some of the so-called hard drugs, that's where the element of prescription comes in, because you then use it for a purpose that is actually useful, that will be helpful. But if you simply make a blanket statement that you are going to legalize it, then the harmful aspects of that particular product now come into being, and again, it will be unmitigated.
No, I think here, the reason I've brought up alcohol, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm not necessarily saying that. But why is alcohol legal and marijuana not legal? If both are as
both
harmful.
are harmful.
Where, I mean, to me, from what I've seen, and this is purely sort of just seeing, I find, a lot of people on alcohol are violent. I've never seen that on somebody smoking weed. They're mellowed out, chilled,
They're happy.
easy. Yeah.
They laugh a lot.
Yep.
Where do you stand on this matter, CT?
Well,
To legalize or not marijuana?
I think it should be legalized.
It's actually, coffee is more addictive than marijuana.
I'm saying I think it should be legalized.
Oh, it
Right.
should.
You're supposed to be asking me why I'm saying this.
Yes,
You're not
that
asking.
was my
Okay,
next
so
Oh,
see,
sorry.
why
Why
are
are
you
you saying this, CT?
Because in places where it has been legalized, they have legalized it and even structured the legalization, meaning they even state what is permissible, how the quantities, where you are permitted to consume it, etc., etc.
Better
etc.
controlled, yeah.
Yes, it is controlled. Now, this argument is the same argument that is used with legalizing something like prostitution or sex work.
Yeah.
You see, if it's something people are going to do anyway, so why not protect
control it.
Yeah, why not have it structured so that it actually works within something that can be managed? It's the same argument. Same argument that Njeri is making about alcohol. It is managed. It is stated there are things that should be done, should not be done. It's not done, but it exists. That's all. Yes.
And Ndu, where do you stand on this?
Look, I think if there's something that, you know me, it's always towards the development. If there's something that can be done to help in particular cases, now I'm looking at, cancer patients, for example, and if we have, a structured way of doing things, if we have a structured way of administering this particular drug to aid in the relief or to aid or to treat or to heal, especially when it comes to things like cancer, then yes, I think that we need to look at the legal aspects of it and say perhaps we should let it in the door in a structured manner, because then we run the risk of having things run amok if we do not.
We're talking about having it legalized simply for sort of medicinal purposes.
Simply for medicinal purposes.
There's no harm in having it legalized for recreational purposes. I mean,
As well.
Coffee, cigarette smoking, or nicotine, a lot more addictive if it's addiction we're scared of. I think I disagree with CT. I think alcohol is a lot more harmful. You have less control over yourself whilst under the influence of alcohol. So I'm not advocating just for it to be legalized for medicinal purposes, because I'm sure from a medicinal perspective you can get chemicals within that put into a tablet and so on. I want it legalized for recreational purposes.
And there are some countries that have done that.
With the necessary
America.
caps, put on it.
Well, then it's controlled.
Yes, then it's controlled and structured.
Some states.
Many
Some states in America, not
I
the
know
entire
Holland.
United States.
I remember
the
when
Netherlands
Netherlands,
has
yeah.
actually
Recreational
for
legalized
the longest.
Canada as
Yeah.
well.
For recreational purposes.
And it's big business now, actually. I know there have been negotiations with some African countries to grow the crop as a crop. As you would grow cotton, I know maize. As a crop. So.
That would be interesting.
Take a look at what's happening in the counties as well. In Bomet, the new governor, Hilary Barchok, has run into his first hurdle since taking office after the county assembly on Wednesday rejected 6 members of his executive. Now, the county assembly can have a maximum of 10. 6 of them have been rejected by the county assembly, and these 6 actually were the ones that were initially appointed by Mr. Barchok and his predecessor, the governor, Laboso. So, upon taking office, this is what Mr. Barchok did, Dr. Barchok did. He actually forwarded all the names of the CECs to the county assembly and said, vet them afresh. And the ones that you approve are the ones I'm going to retain. So the assembly rejects 6 of people who've been in office for the last 1 year and 1.5 years. He's already running into turmoil, into rough waters.
And those are people he wanted out. He wouldn't have carried out that exercise if he didn't want them out of the cabinet. So, clever strategy there.
Yeah. So
I agree with you, Njeri, because you see, when someone takes over, if you take over the mantle of, say, your predecessor, you want a clean slate. You want your own people. You want to have people you can work with. Remember, this is a political position. Huh? And there are things he has in mind. He may have been a deputy, but doesn't mean he doesn't have his own mind. And he doesn't have an idea of what he'd like to do. He does.
So this tells us actually that Dr. Joyce Laboso had picked this without consultation or without...
No. She was the governor.
Do you thought... Well,
she was the governor.
So they didn't emerge from the Bomet State House with, rolled up sleeves and announced the cabinet together?
Let me ask you a question.
We've seen this happen elsewhere.
Even if you agree with your deputy, there's only one governor. And at the end of the day, the governor's views will hold sway.
It also actually just indicates that when that period when Dr. Barchok was acting as governor, some CECs were giving him a hard time.
CECs give all governors a hard time. And CECs forget CECs, within the county, just read any county. The CECs are fighting with the assembly. The assembly is fighting with the governor. This drama is never ending. It's always this or the other, or this or the other, or this or the other.
It's meant to be a push and pull.
Yes. We don't see it at the national level because the National Assembly is a much bigger outfit and they have more teeth and they've been at it longer, and the executive has its own problems to deal with at a national level. But at a county level, Unfortunately, the incubation of all these issues is within a much smaller and a much more confined space. So it's bound to be even more explosive.
Right. This is a Situation Room right here on Spice FM. My name is Latiff, Okoh, Njeri Thorne, and CT Muga with you this morning. It's 25 minutes to 7 o'clock.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
CT Muga, Okoh, Njeri Thorne, Latiff in the Situation Room this morning. Good morning, and how are you doing? 22 minutes to 7 o'clock. We're taking a look at what's been covered in the newspapers this morning.
Well, just quickly looking at, interestingly, that 100 billion shillings highway is going to benefit 4 counties, and this is as a result of a commitment from the World Bank. 740-kilometer highway at a cost of 100 billion shillings that will run through 4 counties, Isiolo, Mary, Wajir and Mandera. The project will be undertaken by the Kenya National Highways Authority. And so I think when I see development like that, I'm quite happy. I don't know what the caveats or the conditions are of this particular highway being constructed, but it looks like there will be some benefit now when we look at things like, markets opening up and access to proper roads now and a development infrastructure. So it seems that there's a handshake on development in these areas, and I think that's a good thing. Yes.
Yeah, and reflective of that handshake, we're still in counties. Inside Kisumu Port's 3 billion makeover. Basically, the Kenyan Navy has taken control of the Kisumu port as details of ongoing expansion and rehabilitation emerged ahead of the port's long-awaited reopening. The 3 billion makeover will place the 118-year-old port at the center of marine trade in East and Central Africa. So again, a growth and development and no barriers.
What does it mean that the Kenyan Navy has taken over?
I remember us discussing this a while back, what the Navy is doing in Kisumu.
and we're talking about actually security around the area. But the port itself should be managed by the Kenya Ports Authority, right? So is the Kenya Navy coming in just to patrol the waters of Lake Victoria, or is it?
I guess maybe the security issues are
one of
being
the things
dealt with.
that if we just look at the water bodies that we have, the Indian Ocean, Mombasa, Lamu, we have naval bases in both places.
Yes.
The question is not what the Navy is doing there. Why was the Navy not present there
Why
before?
was there no naval base?
Yes, why wasn't there? And you're talking about a water body that places us very directly and very close to our neighbors. And this is amidst constant complaints by inhabitants of that particular region, of constant harassment by security personnel from our neighboring countries.
Yep.
Yes. So this isn't anything new. We have a naval base in Okoh in Lamu. We have a naval base in Mtongwe in Mombasa. Having a naval base in Kisumu is not something that should be new. It's something that ought to have happened a great long time ago.
What's in the business?
Well, there's this issue. It's a revolving issue. It's like musical chairs. Why counties missed out on state funding? This story comes in different forms and shapes, but it's same thing.
It's the same.
Yes, the Exchequer, the Treasury will tell you the counties did not meet certain conditions that they needed to meet in order to receive certain monies. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's not a new story. And what is interesting is some of the areas that they missed out on specifically, the large chunk of it was in water and sanitation related issues.
I see.
Now, and
Those are critical
yes, they're critical.
services.
Yes, because you're talking about a huge chunk of money, 3.8 billion. Now, 3.8 billion shillings is a great deal of money.
It's a lot of money.
It is a great, yes. And yet, despite the complaints, the same Exchequer tells us that the amount of money that the 47 counties received was 360 billion. You know, we hear the word billion so often, it doesn't even sound like it is a lot of money.
It doesn't resonate as a lot.
A billion is nothing. I mean,
Yes.
we have 14 billion, 82 billion,
Yes.
81 billion.
Even a million is a great deal of money. 100,000 is a great deal of money.
Yes.
1,000 is a great deal of money. 100 shillings is a great deal of money. To understand it, think of all the relatives you have, that is if you have relatives, who keep asking you for handouts. And tell me how often and how happy you are to even dish out 500 shillings.
Or 50.
Yes, thank you. now you've given a perspective.
Whilst we're at business, something that might interest you, CT. Co-op profit rises to 7.5 billion on higher fees. It's gone up 5.6% growth from last year.
Who's?
It's a Co-op bank making even more money, and I'm sure CT is wondering why they're not dishing it out to people and being philanthropic.
He'll actually love this one on Business Daily. Banks raking 85 billion shilling profit in 6 months.
You know, that's what we read about. Okay.
That
Yes, and the same business sector, you'll hear M-Pesa agents get 22 billion shillings. Safaricom paid out to the agents in terms of commissions 22 billion shillings, meaning those who work as agents for Safaricom as M-Pesa agents benefited to that tune in the year.
Yes.
Now, this is a sort of CSR. Now, it's business, yes, but it's out there. Now, maybe these banks do something similar.
85 billion in 6 months.
You know, that's a lot of money, Chief.
In 6 months. 12.6% growth year on year, actually. If you compare
Yes.
these 6 months to the
And
last 6
why
months.
don't you compare it to the growth of our economy and also juxtapose it to the rate of inflation in the country? And then throw in unemployment just for good measure.
Just for good measure.
Yes. And tell us where we are.
Well, yeah, they're cutting costs, of course, maybe there isn't retrenchment of a couple of staff.
The
also.
question still rises.
So you've made 85 billion shillings and you're firing people.
Yeah, what are you telling us exactly? What is this thing that you're telling us?
You don't want to share, in other words. I mean, it's what we've been saying all
Yes.
the time, isn't it?
It's
You
the
really
bottom
don't want
line.
to share. So
And
that's
Njeri
the
will
bottom
tell you-
line.
Njeri will tell you bottom
They're not in the
line.
business of sharing. They're in the
Yes.
business of making money.
Bottom line.
It's a
They'll
business-
share with their shareholders. Jerry, right?
Yes, you want to stake
it's called
in
a
the
dividend.
profits, you buy some shares and invest.
It's called a dividend.
Nothing's for free, CT.
You know, every time I bring in the issue of CSR, Njeri twists this and states, she actually is claiming that all I'm saying that people should be given freebies. I am not saying
No,
that.
what you're suggesting is that the profits should trickle down right through to the cashier or the teller, that they should be having
Yes.
more money.
Yes.
Maybe-
But where
yes.
where do we see that happen? I mean, look at
also-
McDonald's, for instance. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it has the lowest wage for somebody serving up at the counter. Look at even something more familiar to all of us. Look at football. Look at how much the clubs make or how much the players get paid. But it's not going to trickle down to somebody who's, the person who cleans their grounds and so on. Business and capitalism
There is an
just
index-
doesn't work like that.
There's an index that's run every year, actually, and we're speaking about this even as we move on. And you could actually just check it out for us. The most, what is it called? By Federation of Kenya Employers, where they rate their employers and they say the best places, the best company to work for in Kenya is ABCD. How many of those in the top 5 are banks? If banks are making this kind of money, is it translating to maybe even are they paying their employees well? Are they taking care of their employees well? Is that actually helping? Because that could be also the other thing that trickles down, not necessarily CSR to the community, but really, look, you're making money.
That's what CT's been talking about.
You're
Why are
making
you
money.
retrenching people if
Yeah.
you're making this
Pay
much
them
money?
well.
People are
Maybe
part
the
of
reason they're
management
making that
salaries.
much money is because they're tight-fisted in the first instance. Maybe that's why they can make that amount of money.
Control your overheads.
Maybe that's why they're that profitable.
Which overhead?
Interestingly, the question that you asked me of the top 10, none of them are banks.
Oh,
Of the top 10 employers?
Yes.
the top 10 employers.
What industry? What sector?
It's looking across. It's cross-sectoral actually, and we're looking from beverage makers to technology to mobile operators.
And this is in Kenya.
And this is actually
I wonder
yes.
which mobile operator.
CT
So
would
cryptic.
know.
You know, the people who bank with you, these are your partners. The people who work for you, these are your partners. And this isn't some esoteric logic. When there is benefit, it should be all round. That's all. If the really, really expansive rewards that the top officials got were not so glaring, I wouldn't even have a leg to stand on in this debate.
Yeah.
But I do.
But they need to attract the best in the industry. So there's competition for the best. You know, one bank will offer a CEO 300 million, the other will offer 400 million. So
All right. So
just like football players.
That competition should trickle down to one bank will offer a teller this much and the other bank will offer a teller this much. Right?
I think it's a skills. I mean, I don't want to
Tell us
suggest that
okay.
there's a skill set that you'll find CEOs have, and they've got the competitive edge.
It's fine. Let them get the bonuses.
And to attract the best, the banks will pay out top dollar.
Any other news in business?
Well, I'm looking at international news. Don't worry about drinking microplastics in water, the UN says. Microplastics, of course, are created when man-made materials break down into tiny particles in our water. So the UN is telling us that there's not enough for it to be risky or for it to cause any harm as yet. That's coming across.
Interesting to note also that Nigeria celebrates 3 years of being polio-free.
Whoa.
It's a huge campaign that actually took off in 2016 to actually get in, because it was a big problem. This disease caused nationwide problems in the country, and the World Health Organization now joined hands with the government and put through this program that would see the polio vaccination, coming through all corners of the country. And it's actually now proposed to be used as a model for the rest of the continent to get Africa polio free in the coming years. And so I think that's a good thing coming out of the giant.
I think they need to talk more about this, because there's a movement at the moment, the anti-vaxxers, that's causing the re-emergence of quite a few things or diseases that we thought had been eradicated.
Right.
It started off, of course, as a fringe sort of movement where people were saying vaccinations don't work, it's a government agenda, it's a conspiracy, they're injecting things into us that will kill us in 20 years to control the population. We've had it here with the Catholic Church claiming that some vaccinations contain long-term contraceptives to stop population growth from the West, as a Western agenda and so on. And this is leading, there's been a re-emergence of, say, measles in the West. And these are very dangerous, life-threatening diseases. So it's fantastic that we can see the benefits of vaccinations. In fact, there's been talk of social media platforms not being allowed or being getting rights to block conversations on anti-vaccinations, and that's how dangerous they are. So just the way you can't have talk on terrorism or glorifying terrorism.
Yeah, it's a threat to national security, actually.
Global security.
Global
some of
security.
these diseases, it's taken a long time to eradicate. And to see something like measles rear its ugly head, it's a shame, considering, we've made such advances in ensuring it's eradicated. Kudos to Nigeria on that.
Do they have an issue like we have? Because, we have the reemergence of polio in Kenya, and CTU will weigh in on this. And it's because it's been largely attributed to our porous borders from countries that don't have proper governance and health structures. Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, and the people crossing over. And also people who are coming from war-ravaged or conflict areas, like in the DRC, and crossing over into Kenya. And those are part of the reason why we've been having a renewed drive on polio vaccination.
Precisely. This vaccination drive is something that was successful and has been successful in this country, as have other vaccination drives. And this is something the Ministry of Health has taken very, very seriously over the years. And the results have been very, very positive. But as you correctly stated, with the issues and the conflicts in our neighboring countries, and call it porous borders for lack of a better expression, yes, such problems will arise. But one of the things that the Ministry of Health does well, it manages these situations very, very, very well. Yes, that it does. Yes.
So what's happening in Somalia, South Somalia?
Jubaland president wins poll amidst fallout with central government. Well, this is interesting because this particular election, even the UN is commenting and saying that the method by which they went about electing this gentleman by the name of Madobe is something that people are questioning. Remember, Jubaland is semi-autonomous.
Yes.
Okay? And the central government in Mogadishu are saying they do not recognize those results. Now, what this means is that even before the gentleman begins his supposed second term, he already has a problem in his hands.
But he had a problem when he was finishing his first term.
Yes. And the opposition also feel that they were locked out of this particular process. But these aren't noises that are unfamiliar with any electoral process on this continent. They are not unfamiliar. What makes Somalia unique is this. There are clear areas that are semi-autonomous, and there's a central government who some of the semi-autonomous provinces within Somalia don't even recognize. So you have a country in flux. There's a president who says he's president, and there are people who would disagree with you. They do not seem to share that same view that this gentleman is a president. But this is what happens when you have a country. Remember, this isn't tribal. This is clan-based differences.
Yes.
But the differences are so strong. And the differences, as I said, it's not language, it isn't culture, clan. They are strong. And that is why the insurgents like Al-Shabaab have been able to thrive. Because all you need to do is to function in a region that has disagreements with another region within the same country. But anyway, this is an ongoing conflict. Let's watch and see how it continues.
The issue of Ali Madobe's issues actually also brings in geopolitics.
Ahmed.
Yes, Ahmed Madobe.
Yes.
Right? It brings in a lot of regional geopolitics as well. Because remember, this is a man who worked very well with Kenya. Remember when Kenya was actually deployed its troops to Somalia and the area of Kismayo and all, and Madobe worked very well with Kenya. Now, Ethiopia, which is working very well with the central government, was against the election of Madobe. Ethiopia, with its huge military, had issues with Madobe. So there's already an issue of where does Kenya stand, and Kenya took a silent stand on this and said, well, let's observe what's happening. Ethiopia came out very strongly and said, no. I think we should have other elections conducted the proper way in their definition of proper. Now we have Madobe taking over.
If you want to ask about this the so-called disagreement, think back. Remember, the Ethiopian government have had an issue with the Oromo Liberation Front.
Yes.
Now, the Oromos, as you call them in Ethiopia, are the people who in Kenya we call the
Borana.
Precisely. Same people.
Borana.
Yes. Now, if you remember, Ethiopia also have had problems with Somali. Okay, class, tell me, what was
We're learning. You tell us.
What was that conflict called? And they had it for years.
Oromia.
Eric is on a roll today, clearly.
You see, the thing is this, some of our clan issues tend to go across our borders. Simply because we share communities.
But what was the name of this clash?
I want you to find out.
The community in Ethiopia that is close to the community in Somalia. So we know the Oromos and the Borana are the same.
No. I want you to do this work.
And then there's in Somalia there is it escapes me, but yes. So the clashes are there.
It isn't clashes. Yes, sir.
Ogadenia.
You've got it.
Yes.
It's the Ogaden War.
The Ogadenia.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hey. And that same community.
Top marks.
No, 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
That same community, even within Somali, are the same people who, though some argue, are the fellows you find in Garissa.
Right.
And they're the same people who house some of the strongest personalities whose background is among the Somali in Kenya. So, if that representation plays out in Kenya, tell me, and there's a conflict in Somali, don't you think it'll play out in Kenya as well?
Because they're made up of the same stock.
Same people. It's not different. It's like going to Busia land and talk about the Samia. The Samia in Uganda are the same Samia in Kenya. The Pokot in Uganda are the same Pokot. They're not different. The Maasai in Tanzania, the same Maasai in Kenya. So, if there's an issue on the other side, these borders are recognized by those who choose to. These communities do not give a hoot about these borders. They cross the borders willy-nilly as and when they see fit. Yes.
Let's close the hour with what's happening in Sudan. So Sudan has a new prime minister. His name is Abdallah Hamdok. He was sworn in on Wednesday as the leader of the transitional government, and he has vowed to make achieving peace and solving the country's economic crisis a priority. So Sudan, there's movement there. United States, Britain and Norway have welcomed Hamdok's appointment, calling it a historic moment for Sudan, and urged the military to engage constructively with the new government. Now, let's hope that there's going to actually be peace. So this is your handshake in Sudan.
I hope it does continue, because there are many people and institutions who've benefited from the lack of peace in Sudan, and they wouldn't want the situation to be maintained or to be resolved. So let's hope that they are not going to play their hand when it comes to this, and that this new prime minister will be able to actually maintain that particular peace initiative.
What do you see them doing next? Well, say for going into an election, they'll form
I think
BBI,
there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done.
Bridges?
There are a lot of bridges that need to be built, and maybe such initiatives should be set up, and maybe. But I think that's where they need to. There's a lot of cohesion within this Sudan that needs to happen for them to now say, well, this is where we are as a country. Before that, we begin to look, and you need to have quite an influential leadership to be able to get that to happen. It's been years and years of of lack of such, and the people who benefited from that are still looking in on the situation. As far as I'm concerned,
disagree with you very vehemently, my dear. But the real issue here is civilians feeling that the civilian participation in this process is not as it should be. They feel that the military is still having sway and holding sway
on what should happen.
Yes. And they feel they were the ones who are responsible for removing Bashir, and so they should play a very central role. So if you're talking about this gentleman being sworn in, step one, but the conflict continues.
It's now 7 o'clock. This is the only breakfast show that isn't afraid to deliver the hard truths about the state of affairs in the country and in the world, including in Sudan. My name is Eric Latiff. I'm joined by Okoh, Njeri Thorne and CT Muga. Let's take a look. In the next hour, we're going to discuss issues starting with the arrest and expected prosecution of one of the largest brewers in the Republic.